Welcome to GenZ Talks. This is your host, Ryan Solomon, the head of community and content at Entre. At Entre, we built a social network for entrepreneurs, investors, creators, and freelancers. Every week, this show is recorded live on Entre, and I get to interview the most ambitious and young entrepreneurs and investors from around the world. And if you'd like to be a part of our next episode of GenZ Talks, maybe even get to come up on stage and ask a question, make sure to head over to joinentre.com and register for GenZ Talks. Now that that's out of the way, it's time to kick things off. Let's go. Kind of set the ground. Me and Andrew met through Twitter somewhere. I don't know where. I think it was somewhere on Twitter.
Somewhere on Twitter, and I think it was at a time when I was helping at Center Credit. We were trying to find more creators, for marketing strategy, building that up. So I think that's how, or something. Oh, I think it might have been Michael Sickler's. What is it? One of his
Michael Sircon's event. That kind of was.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we met through that. He was at a past company called Center Credit. And now he's moved over to Cantos, and I'm going to allow him to give his whole intro and kind of ways to work. I got some questions prepped for him about breaking into VC. And then from there, if you guys do want to drop questions while we're talking, get them in in-room chat. And then once we kind of go through some of the stuff that me and Andrew are going to be talking about, toward the end, we'll allow people to hit the little raise hand button and actually pop up on stage and ask any questions. So Andrew, if you want to introduce yourself, share who you are, what you're doing, and tell us a little about Cantos.
Yeah. Anyways, my name is Andrew. If you haven't done that already, I am a hard tech analyst at Cantos Ventures. I graduated from University of Arizona a couple of years ago, May 2020, the unfortunate class, 2020. And since then, I've just kind of been in the whole entrepreneurial tech ecosystem. And about sometime, let's say 7-8 months now, is when I made the transition into venture capital.
Nice. There we go. So you went from working at a startup to kind of breaking your way into VC. And that's kind of the title of the room. So I definitely want to touch on that. So what was that experience of breaking into VC? Was it through, I know you write articles. What was the things that helped you kind of get that job? Did you do some things to prep? What was that process like for you?
So it was a lot of moving parts. Okay. One big part of it was, I know when the pandemic started, I wasn't even graduated yet. I made the decision I wanted to start my own blog. I've always had these, insane curiosities in technology. I've loved deep tech, or been passionate about deep tech since I was little and I first watched Star Wars. So it finally came to, I wanted to get these ideas out on paper, and so I could publish them and people could see my thinking. And so that was one aspect. And then another aspect was that for my senior year, I actually started, me and some classmates started our own company so we could sponsor ourselves for a senior design project. That went kind of well, but when that was over, I still had like a hunger to continue doing the whole entrepreneurial thing. And then eventually I found Center Credit. And I really was on board and about what was going on with Center Credit. And so I stuck with them for some time, but through having a bunch of meetings, and meetings with other deep tech founders, investors, stakeholders, and then also just kind of getting out there. I mean, I was doing this all virtual, it's the pandemic, right? And so I just became very, very interested in venture capital. I didn't know too much about it before, other than it was just investing. In startups. And so as I learned more and more about venture capital, I was like, hey, I think I want to give it a try. So with that being said, I think it was about 3-4 months. So May is when I joined Cantos. 3-4 months before I joined Cantos, that I made the decision, okay, I'm going to try to do this. Mind you that I was CTO and I was confident that I wanted to stay as CTO. So I needed to find something that was like part-time. So where I could, still gain my interest, but not fully dive into that aspect. And so anyways, as that came along, I was applying and interviewing. I was doing just like the regular thing like any other person who just graduated from college, uh, reading whatever stuff that a bunch of other people told me to read about venture capital, and then trying to be this thing that I really wasn't, because I thought this was like finance standard. And eventually, um, I think after like 2, 3 months of trying, I was like, man, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to be my authentic self. And I am going to just talk with people and build relationships, not connections. And eventually it worked out. I found a few firms that were actually interested in having me on board. And at the same time, I found Cantos, and Cantos just completely aligned with the type of person I was. And yeah, so that's how
So
that happened.
to that point, I do like seeing, because I see a lot of people, I have a lot of friends that like broke into VC like right out of college. They went to Stanford or UCLA or wherever, and then they would itch to be an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
I kind of like what you did, where also I think it's a lot more. I think it's more common that a lot better VCs already have operating experience.
Yeah.
They're a founder or they're just a key role at a company, and then they go back into venture because then they kind of really see, especially if you're early stage venture, uh,
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. And did you, when you kind of said you were just being your authentic self, just meeting people, getting relationships? So were you just kind of like reaching out to people, just being like, "Hey, I'm interested in venture. I'd love to talk." Like, what was that process like? And is that what you did with Cantos, or did you just like straight up apply?
Yeah. So, I mean, when the pandemic started, everyone went remote. You have to think like the barriers opened up. The barriers that were there earlier weren't there anymore. If you wanted to meet general partners from other firms, you just had to just go to meetings, like there was just meetings all over the place. And then there was just like opportunities to go and have these little like networking events and just chat with people. And that's what I did, like how I met you, Ryan. And so I was just being spontaneous, going about these meetings when they pop up. I'd go and talk to people. And I didn't have an agenda originally. I just wanted to talk with other tech nerds about what was going on. And so, but that helped me to build the relationships that would eventually lead me into breaking into venture capital.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And something I want to touch on, you started writing the blog before you got the position, right?
Yes.
Do
Like,
you think almost a year before?
like, yeah.
Do you think that helped with you being able to get a position, especially in deep tech?
Yeah.
Um, and what other advice would you give to people that are like, maybe like even sort of like fresh out of college, they might not have operational experience. So like, I just want to get into VC. Where do I start? Like, what kind of resources would you push people towards or actions?
Yeah. So writing content was huge for me getting into VC, especially at a deep tech firm. It allowed me to show my thinking and my thought process, right? And to show, okay, if I'm like sourcing a founder doing diligence, then I was kind of doing that already, but for free, right? The only difference was that when I joined Cantos, things became a lot more focused, and I started learning more about our thesis. But another thing too, I'd like to bring up is that after a couple months of trying, I obviously decided I was like, this isn't working the way I'm trying to do it. So my blog, I used to just write randomly about, blockchain, some Sencha stuff for like fintech. And then I was like, how about let me go and actually interview the stakeholders, the people that I would be working with all the time. And so that's when I started the deep tech dive. And so I kind of started that and, started to learn from the founders and was able to show, hey, here, I'm actually already talking to the people and I'm finding these people and trying to learn more about what future initiatives are. And along the way, too, I incorporated some deep tech investors, like John Malik helped a lot. And he's been kind of like a counselor to me on the side. And so doing that all incorporated into one was very, very helpful. And I would say I could almost go to say that without my blog, I'm not a venture capital man, or at least I'm not at Cantos.
That mean, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I see a lot of people doing that because, like you said, it shows the way you think.
Yeah.
on a lot of things that it gives you, because like especially within VC, obviously you don't have a portfolio. It's not like being a graphic designer where you can go and say, "Hey,
Right.
look, I did all these graphics. Like, look what I made." It's way more different. It's way different trying to get your first job and venture because you don't have that. You don't have any. It's not like you've been, doing investments. It's not like you've been investing in startups.
Yeah.
But what you can write about is things that you're bullish on, have hot takes, and kind of show the way that you think, and VCs will notice that.
Yeah. And to go on to your question on, I didn't really answer this about what advice, a piece of advice you'd have for those interested. And it's going back to my original journey into VC Cantos is being your authentic self. And I can't express that enough. Just being you. Don't be this cookie cutter VC industry standard that you think is supposed to like fit the mold, because that's not the case, and especially now, a lot of things are changing, times are changing. The VC landscape is completely changing. Barriers that were there, as I said before, are not there anymore. And also people just want to be, I mean, just think about it. If you have a coworker, I'd rather work with somebody who's just honest, and I know what I'm going to get. And I'm like, oh, I like that guy, instead of just trying to act like something you're not. And then as soon as you get in, you're going to completely act like completely opposite of what you were trying to act like before. So I think partners and associates and just anybody in VC they can sniff that out. We talk to founders, we talk to people every single day. It's a huge relationship business. And on top of that, just actually going back, one of the greatest VCs, actually, Doug Leone, legendary partner of Sequoia. He says this many times in his meeting with Don Valentino, who a lot of people allude to as the father of venture capital.
Mhm.
And, he mentioned Don asked him what matters, and Doug just completely just spilled out for like 5 minutes or so. And then Don, after that, he said, what else? And Doug just says, I gave you everything I had, and it came from him just being his honest self and just saying, you know, what he can and can't do, and what he's looking towards in the future. And, mind you that Doug was not, he wasn't this very experienced investor or whatnot. He was an immigrant from Italy and came from all these other areas, and he was just trying to break in. And especially at that time, that's when the cookie cutter mold was probably the right way to go. But still, he found a way to break it. So be your authentic self.
I think authenticity goes a long way. It's really funny because I was literally on a room before this earlier today at 6, and we were talking about like community building and like talking to it even applies to like what I do whenever I talk to early users and just like trying to be authentic and also providing value. Even if like what I'm working on can't, I always try to have some form of like resources and things along those lines.
Yeah.
And more on the resource side, did you read what's it called? Like venture deals? Did you like kind of like touch yourself up on things, or did you just like kind of just do some diving? 'Cause I feel like you don't realistically, from my understanding, you don't realistically need to be a finance pro. Like
Yeah.
you really definitely don't. I think people have that like false dichotomy of you needing to know how every deal's structured and all this other
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Especially in deep tech, deep tech, you want this kind of different intuition of like creativity, mixed with just people who are open-minded and different. You can't, I guess, predict the future in deep tech if you're just very like strict and standard, and you're kind of like that whole like public equities finance route. I don't think that works too well in deep tech investing. And there's some aspects that do help, maybe if you're like portfolio construction, and just going straight for it all and trying to be a partner and start your own firm. But going off of these like old school ways of doing things it's just not working as I believe it's not going to work as much nowadays.
No, I think a lot of things are changing very fast in VC. I mean, Sequoia completely restructured the 10-year fund.
Yeah.
Evergreen, right? Which is cool because like, I feel like venture, it's weird. I feel like some parts of venture move really slow and then other parts of it are just like, fly. Cause there's new funds popping up all over the place. One thing I believe is like money grows on trees. You just have to go get it.
Yeah.
Uh, there's money all over. It's so cheap. The next thing I wanted to touch on is like, I know that you're technical, obviously, as a CTO, as like a past CTO. Do you think that you need to have a form of expertise to get into certain funds? Like, do you think you could be non-technical and be at Cantos, for example?
Okay. So let's break this before I go straight into like deep tech. Let's break this like umbrella over the entire VC industry. Obviously, I would say first and foremost, if you're not passionate about the things that fund focuses on, then even if you somehow break in, even after getting through all the interviews and stuff, then that's not going to be a turn on, like eventually you're gonna be worn out really quickly. I mean, the, the greatest pro about VC that I believe is that you get paid to learn. You get paid to learn about the things that you love about. I mean, that you're passionate about. So, if you're not passionate about, if you don't even really understand those certain tech sectors, then yeah, it might be pretty hard. I don't think it's impossible to break into a fund. I mean, I think anything is possible. I think you can trick anybody into anything, right? Google engineers do it all the time. And, but at, but if you really want to be a part of a firm, then you should have at least some underlying basis of understanding what those technologies are. If you're going to be into crypto and NFTs and whatnot, like you should be at least know what Ethereum is and know about DAO, that kind of stuff. If you're going to do deep tech, um, at least you're not going to know all of the sectors and you're not going to be an expert, by the way. That I don't expect anybody to be, but like at least have an underlying interest and maybe keen understanding on those tech sectors. That'd be very, very helpful. And it will, it goes a long way.
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I love what you touched on when you said, um, you get paid to learn. Like, I never even thought about it like that, especially even like as, even if you're like super early to VC, especially as an analyst, like it's just you researching every single thing you can find about a company and industry, what they're doing, why, and actually thinking a lot. Like, I think that's a really cool point, and honestly, why I think a lot of people really like the venture route.
Yeah.
Um, and then let's see here. Also, to touch a little bit on um, like deep tech. Um, is there any resources if anyone does want to kind of like dive into it? Obviously, you could plug yourself if you want to drop that in the chat because I think you could also if you check out Andrew's profile, you give him a follow. He posts his blog here on Entre all the time, so make sure to check out some of his posts. But is there any other resources that you go to keep up on news or to keep up on what's happening in space?
Yeah. So this one is a bit hard. And the reason why is to be a great investor, or, I'm not saying I'm a great investor yet. I'm nowhere near close. There's a lot more for me to do before I get there, but it requires an absurd amount of reading, even. Like Warren Buffett says it over and over again. It is a momentous amount of reading. So there's no like one resource that I can point anybody to as an investor to be like, oh, read that and you're going to be dialed in what venture capital is.
Mhm.
Especially deep tech, learning venture capital is one thing. Learning deep tech, I mean, there's all these sectors. You're not even going to be an expert in every single one, especially if you're agnostic fund like we are, and we look at all these different sectors, then you have to just kind of be expert enough to understand what questions to ask. And then, you go off of that. But okay, going off of resources, I would say, well, one, books. Everyone hates to hear it, but
Yep.
reading, you don't always have to be reading books though. Newsletters, there's plenty of great newsletters out there. Some newsletters I'm subscribed to. It's like IEE newsletter. That's like an engineering newsletter. They're prepared. Climate Tech VC. That's another great newsletter. And then podcasts. There is a lot of podcasts. When I joined Cantos, that's one thing Ian Roundtree, my boss, was big on, was podcasts. And those are easier, more easier to digest because you can do them almost any time, right? You can just be on a walk or you can be working out or whatever you're doing, as long as you're not talking to somebody else, you can just be listening to podcasts. And there are plenty of different podcasts I can kind of bring out, like 20 VC.
Yep.
Acquired podcast is great. I will like emphasis on acquired podcast. Think like an investor, and yeah, those are good. Oh, and Build the Future, which by the way, Ian was just interviewed on not too long ago. So yeah.
Solid. No, honestly, I 100% agree. I got myself an Audible so that way I can just listen to books if I'm walking around. Cause like I like reading. I go in phases with it, but no, I like all of those. And then I kind of want to, cause I think a lot of people don't know what the venture role, like what it's really like to work at a venture firm. So
Yeah.
from your experience, kind of like, what is your day to day like? What are things that like might have surprised you? Maybe things that were better, worse than you expected. Yeah, kind of take us through a day at Cantos.
Okay. So let me kind of condense it into an average of days because
Yeah.
almost every single day is different. And I can imagine it's probably a lot different for every single firm and every single person. There's a lot of autonomy in this business. Even as an analyst, there's a lot of autonomy to do things. And especially being in a smaller firm, that grants me even a lot more autonomy. I'm sure at like Lux Capital, an analyst probably has or action items they have to get at. But for me, usually I wake up, start reading already, newsletters that I got from the night before or whatnot, and I'll just kind of go through those. And then usually that'll lead into just kind of checking in with my team. And from there, checking in on emails. Oh my God, emails. They're like never ending sea, but, there's always plenty out there and kind of looking through, because there'll always be companies, founders reaching out to us and then trying to decipher, okay, this one kind of fits, or this, and then dropping those in our chat. And then on top of that, I have always like ongoing projects on the side. Like right now, I'm actually developing a tool for Cantos. So that's kind of like my own thing, prepping that. And then also I have like a variety of market landscapes that I always, when I find very interesting things, I add on to those market landscapes in the tech sectors that I focus on. And yeah, that's usually how like my day to day goes. And going back to, you get paid to learn.
Mhm.
It's not hard for me. There's so many times I'll kind of start out like maybe 7, 6 a.m. It's all over the place. I work remote, so it's not like I
Yeah.
have a check-in time. But then I'll find myself like at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. still going, and sometimes I'll even pull late nighters. Like before I published my nuclear article, which was published a couple of days ago. And I think I stayed like up like till 3, 4 a.m., 2, 3 nights in a row. I still have, even though I dove into BC, I still have that founder energy. But yeah.
How much coffee are you drinking, man? Damn. But I also wanted to ask a little bit about, so like if I kind of want to go through another piece of the puzzle here. A founder reaches out to you and is like, "Hey, I have this great startup. This is what we're doing." Maybe they include their pitch deck. What is kind of like that process like? You analyzing what their startup is like, and then how it gets passed on through to the partners.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like, it takes some time to build that recognition and I'm still building it. Right. So it starts at our thesis and learning well, it's easy for me because I have one boss, right? And he's the founding partner, Ian Roundtree. So I kind of really just have to adjust to what I think he would think about things and try to learn how he thinks. And so, like, let's say I get a company, then immediately, I think I can see more of what's wrong rather than what's good. Because I believe every single founder has something good. And kind of like what Market Greason always says, it's not that you're wrong, it just might be wrong timing. So usually I look more for what isn't good and what won't fit our thesis at the time. And so from there, I'm able to make decisions quickly, and after like 4 or 5 months, I was able to just a company would come in and be like, okay, yeah, this is just not a market we're looking into. Because at Cantos, we have, I mean, it looks like we're deep tech agnostic, but within all these like sectors and areas that we look at, Ian has kind of set up these barriers in between each to like kind of like niche or like funnel in like the type of technologies we want to look at. And then on top of that, then now you start figuring out what kind of founder this is, and is this an actual deep tech founder? Is this a person who has that technical acumen to actually make this in his innovation as an IP like come to life? And then at the same time, does he have the business savvy to galvanize the people, like how Elon Musk did when he was trying to convince investors of SpaceX and Tesla? Um, one one last part I want to touch on, which is a core part of our thesis, and it strives from Hamilton Helmer's Seven Powers. And what Hamilton Helmer says is that there's these seven powers that if a business can capture, is they'll be able to withstand the test of time versus legacy companies and other future disruptors. And so when you find founders that can recognize those seven powers at an early stage, and we look at pre-seed. So if you can see a founder like recognize those powers, then that's a huge signal. That's a great
Mhm.
signal. Shows that this person has a lot of busy this and he's looking towards the future. And for us at Cantos, even though we invest in deep tech, that's the reason why we invest. We actually index on near frontier. We want big businesses, but we want to make sure that will happen within our lifetime. We're not looking for moonshots here, that is to be commercialized in 20, 30 years. We have a fiduciary to our LPs, and we need to find companies that can fit this 10 to 12 year lifetime of, finally reaching their full potential.
And one of the things I wanted to touch on too, and I see some comments coming in through the room chat. I'll get to those in a sec. One of the things I did want to say was whenever you're looking at a founder, looking at a business, like what are the things that you look for that are those positive signals, like even beyond maybe those seven powers? What are some things that you personally look for? Maybe other partners of your team don't necessarily have the same thesis, or not same thesis because I guess you're the same company,
Yeah.
same like mindset. Like what kind of things do you look for in deep tech startups?
Yeah. And being deep tech, it's a bit different. I like to think. I think it's different from all the other areas of investing. It's hard to kind of like break founders into just like this one of deep tech founders, like where they do these things, but one, at least on the management team now, let's not just look at the founder, but the management team always, usually there's somebody on that management team that has extensive experience within whatever technology you're planning to commercialize or build. Um, so that's big. And also we want to see founders who do have experience as builders, right? And if you're going to be building, have experience as a builder. Um, Also, I think it's just like any other venture capitalist looking for the tenacity within founder, like to the extent of the game. Are they trying at all costs to make this happen? Like how much do they care and whatnot? And that part though, it's kind of hard to figure out because I believe anybody that's spending that much time on a company is probably very ambitious about what they're pitching to you, whether or not you think it's a good idea. And then, I like to think that a lot of my own mindset about what a deep tech founder is has been curated through my time at Cantos. And so it's almost hard for me to not look at startups without almost acting like my boss and like, kind of re-seeing the same things. But I mean, there's times when I have my own thoughts and like, I think this founder could be great, but a lot of times, even if it doesn't agree with the firm, that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't agree with me. And a lot of times I'll still help out those founders because I think that's our first and foremost priority is to help founders. It doesn't matter whether we're going to invest in them or not. Um, I'm always doing that. I'm always in the Twitter DMs trying to connect people with other people. And, that's one of our biggest value adds as venture capitalists is literally just introduction. A simple introduction can do so much for a founder. And, giving them candid feedback, even though sometimes it may be hard to do so, is very, very helpful, and I know Michael knows this as a founder, you want to hear more about what's bad than what's good, right? So, and I remember that when I was CTO, tell me the bad, not the good. You can kind of give me a pat on the back, but I want to know what's breaking down so I can build it to be better.
I love that. And definitely like with the introductions, that's a huge thing. Like what I was touching on earlier when I was talking about community building, like finding a way to provide even the small, like, because the thing I was talking about was getting that early feedback earlier today. And I was saying you should always leave that person with a golden nugget of value, just like something, even if it's like the smallest thing with an introduction or helping them in one way or another, or actual feedback. I think that's huge. Um, then what was the other point I had? Oh, slipped. We'll come back to it. Um, but I saw a couple questions come in from the audience, and if anyone in the audience does want to come up on stage and ask a question, you can click the little raise hand button, and I can bring you up. But what I have here is question from Sasika. She said, "What are the fundamentals of starting a career at VC? Where do you start? Required qualifications, networking opportunities, etc."
Okay. Um, let's go first. One, it depends what kind of venture capital firm you're looking on. Find groups, virtual groups that kind of fit that area and well, just join it. I mean, there's Slack and there's like plenty of groups out there. And on top of that, like what Ryan alluded to earlier, Twitter, you will always be able to find the stakeholders and the kind of people you want on Twitter. And Twitter is blowing up and it's becoming more useful than any other platform by far in the tech ecosystem. So utilize Twitter. Um, Try to join as many groups and, meet some people. Like I said, build relationships, not connections. Don't do what we were taught to do in college and just reach out to a bunch of recruiters and say, "Hey, can you refer me to this job?" No, don't do that. Go and ask more like, what can you do for that person first, rather than what can they do for you, and start to build the relationship from there. Be genuine. And like I said, be your authentic self. I think that is probably the most important thing. And yeah, from there, just read and index on whatever technologies that you're interested in. Figure out some kind of platform. It doesn't always have to be writing. I mean, my friend wrote a book, and that's what broke him into Lux Capital, which is probably one of the top deep tech firms in right now. And, he wrote a book. I'm not saying you have to write a book. I'm not saying you have to have a blog, but to just have some kind of platform to create, if you're going into like SaaS or fintech or something, I'm sure there are plenty of partners that would love to see somebody who has a great TikTok, platform or something like that. Even though I don't even use TikTok, but I've seen plenty of investors, tech people use TikTok and greatly to their advantage. So yeah.
I love that. And with the TikTok, we actually interviewed, Animal Capital with Josh Richards.
Yeah. Heard of Animal Capital.
Yeah,
We were trying to get out to them. I don't know whatever happened. I think our CEO was trying to reach out to them or something.
Michael, our CEO, interviewed their managing partner, Marshall Sandman today. It was really interesting listening to him as well. So we had a big VC day.
Yeah.
And then let's see here. We have another question. So some people were asking, what were the 7 powers? I'm not sure if you have them off the top of your head, but who had those 7 powers you'd said?
Okay, so a Hamilton Helmer, and I can try to remember, hopefully. So counter positioning, corner resources, network economies, skill economies, branding. Also, what most seem to think Hamilton actually thinks is probably the weakest of 7 powers, processing power, which is probably one of the hardest powers to attain. And then it's seventh one. I was forget it. I don't like, but I can't remember the seventh one. But yeah, so core resource is about something unique to your IP, right? There's something about you and that company, whether it be your founders or your actual proprietary IP that you have that just no one else can have. Branding, obviously, when you open up like a Tiffany's box, Tiffany's jewelry box, and you just see that box, and then versus just seeing some random jewelry box, that's the effect of branding. That means you've gone branding. And then there's counter positioning and network economies. I can't go over top of them all off my head, but yeah, those are rough estimate.
Solid. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Oh,
Well,
scale economies. So easy one is scale economies, and that's just like think of a social media network. The more users there are, the easier it is. Um,
we feel that.
no, hold up. Sorry. Actually, scale economies mix that with network economies. Network economies is where when you have more users, the better the product. Scale economies is as you begin to scale the product, the better and cheaper the product.
Mm, there it is. And she said also question, Sasika's question again. Besides helping with funding, what ways do you help entrepreneurs cultivate the company into a successful corporation?
Besides, okay, that's a good one. One way, and you know what? This is actually interesting because a lot of people tend to think VCs don't add any value at all other than just deploying capital. And I guess you could say that's true for some firms, but I'd like to think that a lot of firms, investors actually try really hard to push founders in the right direction. So first, that's why it comes to you need to make sure that the founder that you're investing in think that they can be this great big time big tech founder one day. So that has to come first. That has to prelude everything. And then once that happens, then you can start trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, fill in the gaps. Not everyone is going to be like a great technical mind and a semi, good business mind. Then you need to figure out, okay, what about like the other things like branding, right? Especially in deep tech, a lot of investors don't have too much time to be this like design centric. I mean, I'm terrible at design. I'll tell you right now, that is not my thing. But one thing we do at Cantos, that Ian is big about is trying to connect our founders with the design agencies, and branding firms and trying to help them that way. And then another thing, recruiting is probably the most important thing that you can help your founders with, trying to find great minds to, that believe in what's going on to tag along. And that is probably one of the hardest things. And it's probably because it's the most valuable thing, just having more human beings, smart human beings tag along. And then others are just, I mean, you can have your own form of content, like Cantos, we just rolled out our blog. We're planning on having like blog announcements for Cantos 3 investments. And then on top of that, have like podcasts so we can have our founders share their stories. And so, yeah, I would say, and probably if we were to rank them, maybe recruiting at the top, helping out with like branding, PR, all that kind of stuff. And then content, trying to get their stories out there and trying to maximize exposure for your founders. And I'm sure there's other things too, but those are the things, some of the things that we're focused on at Cantos.
That was really good. Um, and then one of the questions we got from Caleb, he said, the business looks good on paper and the founder is enthusiastic. Is that a good candidate for VC funding? Is it as simple as that formula or is it a bit more to it? I think
It's a bit more to it. Um, it's like some form of intuition. And actually, Ian was talking to me about this, and I don't think I full well understand it yet. Um, just being a young analyst, but I think after you meet with enough founders, you kind of have like this intrinsic feeling of like, yes, this is for real. This guy's for real, and this guy can really make these happen. And I mean, make this happen. And then this other guy is, I mean, this might be a bit bullshit. Um, so things can look good on paper, but especially when you're pre-seed and early stage, it's really hard to imagine that everything is perfect. Everything is going 100% well at the early stage and pre-seed stage, especially pre-seed. Pre-seed is when you're really getting things going for a lot of companies. In deep tech, that's when they're going from the academic lab to spinning it out into something, an actual company. So yeah, it's rare that I even come across that. But if I do, that still doesn't mean we still have to do our own diligence, and we still have to meet with the founder and be able to do those eye tests and understand where they're coming from.
And when you're doing that diligence with founders, like 2 questions, what kind of questions are you asking founders? Maybe you have some that you consistently use. Maybe that's like, what are the big shortcomings or things like that? I'm not sure what kind of things you're asking them. Then also, how long do you think, I mean, on average, probably changes based off of each company. How long do you think the diligence phase takes before the check's actually written and wired over, I guess you could say?
So to two of those questions, I will say from the start, it is always different. It is always different. You're not going to ask a satellite company or um, a company trying to electrify airplanes or a quantum computing company the same questions, especially for technical diligence. I mean, in terms of, I guess, more financial, economic diligence, then one, we want to see how big the TAM is, like any other venture capitalists, and we want to see what are the margins here. And what we aim to see, we usually lean on, we want to see product margins of at least 65% or higher. And we want to see that, or we want to see that this can be in like a 10 to 20 plus $billion market. And we do have our biggest requirement is impact. Does this company have the potential to impact billions of lives? And so those are some of like the standard questions to ask, but we don't really ask founders that, we ask ourselves that. And usually founders will bring that information. Like, again, a great founder will already come prepared with most of those answers. We won't have to ask a lot of those questions. If we're asking questions, it's mostly geared towards technical diligence. And every once in a while too, we still have to like figure out market opportunity. So it's a mix of technical and market opportunity, but yeah.
Solid answer. I'm going to drop the site in the chat real quick. And also screen share. Oh, it looks like Leona wants to pop up. I'll bring you up as a host. Go on, Leona.
Hello.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
Doing good.
Great. Uh-oh. We
Uh-oh.
lost, we lost
Awesome.
Andrew.
It's about to be a really good question.
We lost Andrew, but my question was for Andrew.
Yeah, we'll have him. I'm gonna see here what's going on real quick. There he is.
I'm so sorry. I was off and you just accidentally clicked.
All good.
Yeah. Anyways, Liana, what was your question?
Sorry, I was working on my camera. I guess I have it shooting somewhere else. I wanted to ask you, what's after you become, you're recently onboarded with the firm that you're with, but what's
Yeah.
after? What's after for you? Where do you see yourself going?
Okay. So the founder, the founder side of me hasn't gone to sleep, obviously. And even as an analyst at Cantos, I still like the reason why one of my side projects is something a little bit technical and building it. Major reason actually I joined venture capital. Going back to everything I said about you get paid to learn about the things you love or are passionate. And so that's kind of the ordeal. The long haul is that I either end up being the partner of my firm or I end up being a deep tech founder or incubating a deep tech company. And so, yeah, I don't want the operational side of me to go to sleep. So I try to give it a little bit of juicy morsels here and there, some tidbits, but yeah, that is the long goal, I would say. I do want to be either a builder or proctor of the deep tech ecosystem.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Great meeting you.
Likewise. Hey,
I'm a-
a quick pro tip on which camera to, where's my settings here? I can't find it.
you're on, you're on Chrome. There's a little camera at the end of your URL bar, and that's where you can change.
I
Uh,
see it. Sorry, I never join from my laptop. I always do it from my phone or my iPad. So pardon the interruption. Thanks.
all good. All good.
Know that we have I didn't know we had the iPhone, the app up for Entre.
Yeah, we got web and mobile. Mobile we're working on. So people can see us on mobile, but if they came up on stage, they can't turn on their cameras just yet.
So the full mobile app isn't, it's just you see, you have mobile view, but it's not the
mobile. It is a mobile app, but they just can't jump up on stage and turn on their camera yet. We're working on pushing that. Hopefully soon. But also I wanted to jump into another question here. So I'm gonna screen share real fast and pull this up. So I was looking at the site, and there's a lot of really, really cool companies here, and they're all across on so many interesting things: AI for drug discovery, scalability and quantum computing. I wanted to ask, are there any ones here that are? I mean, obviously, we asked this question to other VCs, and obviously, every investment is equally, important. Are there any that make you really, really excited?
um to I would say the best way to answer that is that the Cantos 3, obviously, when I got brought on for the particular raise, uh, the new fund of Cantos 3. So any of the new Cantos 3 companies, I have more personal stake in because I actually helped diligence those companies. But as in terms of like favorite, like this
Not favorite, not favorite. Maybe one that like you're extra excited in that industry. We're not picking favorites. We're just saying ones that excite you. Put it that way.
okay, I can say, well, I'm big on space tech and I'm big on quantum computing. So, companies like Astranis and Atom Computing, those are pretty interesting. They're in pretty interesting industry for me. I've always been huge on the quantum computing sector, but in really, I like to think that we just have an abundance of great companies, and a lot of them I can't even speak on the behalf because I am not the biotech expert and Cantos. That is actually my brilliant coworker, Amy. But companies like Solugen, um, 12, Atom, they're all things, and there's so much more. And Atomos, Atom, I could be your friend. Just guys, but I have to literally name every single one of the companies in our portfolio. But I would say that mostly every single one that you can see as you scroll down, I think they're all really cool. And from the few interactions that I've had with founders so far in our portfolio, I absolutely love every single.
I love that answer. I honestly want to dive in myself. I'm definitely someone who's non-technical, but I think a lot of this tech is, I don't know, I find it really interesting because a lot of this tech, like most people have not a clue about until it's like right in front of their face.
Yeah,
You know, like I feel like everyone knows the buzzword of quantum computing and like gene therapy and things like that, but they've never really taken like a deep dive into it. And I'm gonna add it to my like to do list. Maybe it's like a Friday thing. Actually, no, I'm gonna listen to some of those podcasts when I'm driving on Friday. I'm taking a trip. That's what I'm gonna
yeah,
do. Maybe text you if I need some help. But
yeah. But I understand what you're saying. It's hard to imagine deep tech because a lot of deep tech isn't here yet. A lot of it isn't, you're not going to see it manifest in front of your eyes today or tomorrow. But aren't we right now experiencing a lot of the perks of deep tech companies from the past? We're seeing we're seeing Teslas everywhere, right? We're seeing SpaceX. SpaceX is launching so frequently now. I feel it's like just an airplane, taking off. And then even greater than that, I mean, you dig back further than that. Everything that's going on right now is only possible with tech. What do I mean by that? I mean by the semiconductor industry. And one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of months, I've been doing a lot of research in that area, is that semiconductor manufacturing is probably no, it almost is. I can almost say this, that semiconductor manufacturing is the most complex process in history of humanity so far. The lithography machines, it's technical alchemy. It's literally the closest thing to magic that we have. And those are the reasons why you have all these chips and these semiconductors, and you can do what you can do, and we can have these meetings virtually, and you can call your mom or your dad or, the Snapchat people and all these things. A lot of things are built off the underlying premise of semiconductor manufacturing. And yeah, it's extraordinary how important that is. And that's what started VC. That's where Don Valentino came from. I mean, Don Valentino came from, and that's where he was able to build Sequoia.
that's really interesting. I feel like it's like we kind of take for granted, but don't really understand the complexity of these things. We
Yeah.
don't appreciate it. Gonna have to add it to my list of things to deep dive into.
Yeah. Even like the physical products that you can see in front of you, like the rockets and the cars and stuff, like even quantum computing, they're beautiful machines, but a lot of people aren't going to see quantum computers in front of them. Even when we actually like sufficiently like reach quantum, I don't know, call it quantum supremacy, and we can actually use these things to like stimulate our economy and figure out these kind of simulations and build all these kind of products and do all these kind of insane, crazy stuff. You're not gonna really understand unless you're on the technical side and the tech ecosystem. It's hard to still even imagine what is that quantum computer doing for me, right? I mean, about the bubble, the tech ecosystem bubble on Twitter, a lot of the things that people talk about, you jump outside of that and no one has no idea what you're talking about. And that's the majority of the world. And I know this when I share a lot of these things that I talk about with my friends and whatnot. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And I'll be like, really? Because like everybody in tech knows that, but that's not the case,
Dude, I feel you so much on that. I'm actually going to visit some friends this weekend, and whenever like I was in a group chat with them, and they're like, I forget what I was gonna say, but they're like, "Oh, Sully, you about to send something about crypto blockchain NFT?" Like just like they just made up like this long like text, and it's like
yeah.
yeah, you know me, like that's pretty on point. So I feel you a lot on that, like, and I feel like tech Twitter and just like tech as a whole is in like this like so there's like 50,000 people in a bubble that
Yeah.
like all bounce like the same like handful of topics off of each other for like a week, and then it's like the next for another week.
Exactly. Like we have one big thing happen 1 week, and then everybody else doesn't really hear about it unless they're, on the like business side or finance side. They're not really hearing about it until like later, or even like 4 or 5 months later. And then, for us, sometimes things just come and go. Like 1 or 2 days, everyone talks about it. It's on to the next one. It's like this kind of small, like niche club circle or whatever. But part of it is that we need to bring down those barriers too. We need to get a lot more people in the discussion, and we need a lot more people understanding what's going on.
And dude, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Because like I feel like a lot of people on Entre, like some of them are really into tech and startups and VC. There's a lot of other people who are like, I'm in real estate or I'm in cosmetics or all these other things. But I think having that overlap is huge.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I don't know, it's kind of where I see making things just more accessible and kind of breaking down barriers. I feel like tech Twitter is like oddly public, but also private at the exact same time. As in, like, if you don't know it exists, you don't like. I don't know, if you don't know it exists, you don't know it exists, and you're just never going to be in that sphere, right? You know what I mean? It's like one of those things that's right in front of your face, but you just don't know how to do it or how to interact or how to jump in, or until someone else like loops you into it. You know, that's definitely one of the things I realized with it, and I think we're just trying to make entrepreneurship more accessible. But and I'm trying to think if there's anything else to
One
cover.
thing I can actually highlight off of what you said, kind of going back to what I said, is, a lot of what I found in my research when I was in recurs well and writing my GNR series, genetics, nanotechnology, robotics, three technological revolutions that Kurzweil believes will bring on singularity. And I found that there's this kind of technology is accelerating, innovation is accelerating, but the rate at which organizations accept technology is logarithmic. And a lot of that has to do with those barriers. And actually, the theory is called Martechs Law. And it's just this independent theory that as technology is continuing to accelerate, and we're not catching up fast enough. And now that's due to a lot of things. That's due to regulatory demands from politics, bureaucracy, all this kind of stuff. And then, but a large part of that, I believe, is just from, like I said, outside of the bubble. And then even inside the bubble, there's more bubbles, right? There's like the crypto bubble, there's the capital bubble, there's finance bubble, there's deep tech bubble. And so it's like we want to funnel more of these areas so we can get more people thinking alike on all these topics. You don't have to be a subject matter expert, but you should have a good understanding, or at least a high level understanding of what's going on. And it's going to be hard for you to affect the future. And, the future as it comes on, yeah, a lot of these technologies are going to be great, but what happens when you have baby boomers that are living till 120, 150, but they still don't even understand how to use a phone, before they don't know how to use VR or, all these kind of new technologies, and they're just so far beyond.
And to that point, the one thing that I've realized is a lot of things I try to take with a grain of salt, because what I think, I forget how many people are on Twitter, but like there's only like a couple percent of Americans. It's like honestly it's not as big as it really appears.
Yeah.
I'd have to find the stat on that. But to that point, like tech Twitter is an even smaller percentage of that. And just because something is popping up in that space doesn't mean it's fact, or doesn't mean like the actual general population knows it exists or actually cares.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening with like VR, NFTs, and a lot of these things that people are early on, maybe they're making great money on, but like, does the general public really all want to wear VR headsets? And, like I actually put a tweet out about this the other day, was like, it kind of felt like when the Wii came out, everyone's like, dude, I'm going to be active. I'm going to start playing my Wii and like playing tennis and stuff. And like that died off. And with VR, it's like, are people going to really start running around their living rooms all the time and, doing all their stuff in VR, or are they just going to sit on their phone and or are they going to play games on their PCs like they still are? So that's, you go.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna wrap that point up. Just like that's kind of how I kind of look at things. Is like I try to take some of the stuff when people are really, really bullish and there's a lot of hype around stuff on Twitter. I try to take a step back and like, all right, does the majority of people know about this? And if they did know about it, would they actually care? Because when I talk to my friends about some of this stuff, they're like, selling JPEGs for a bunch of money is really stupid. I'm like, kind of is.
Yeah. Well, as an investor, and this was a piece of advice I got from Guy Parlier, author of Present Future, and my last interview on the Deep Tech Dive, is one thing he looks for. I mean, two things he looks for in every technology before making investment decisions is it asymmetric? Is it something that's not already there? And then is it something that is absolutely necessary, right? That the way, like, and it's inevitable. Like, is it going to happen no matter what? And is it asymmetric? And those tend to be great investments. And, just to wrap up this conversation, because I know we're kind of getting into I just want to say that's everything that we talked about in those last 5 minutes is why I do a lot of what I do. Like, you go on even on my Instagram, you go on my Twitter, I am constantly I'm like, F my aesthetic on Instagram. I am just blowing up all my friends with just a bunch of the stuff that I write on Twitter and that I think about while I'm working, because I believe these things are important. These are going to affect our lives, especially in deep tech, going to affect our lives and going to affect their kids' lives. And so I believe it's of great importance for people to at least understand how the trends are coming about, like with new technology, climate tech, quantum computing, like these are industry changing, disrupting technologies, right? Paradigm shifting, I think is the best word to use. And it's imperative that people understand or have a sense of understanding that these things are going to happen. So yeah.
And the last point I want to make on that, as I was thinking of where you're saying you're sharing it out on Instagram, and you said you weren't on TikTok earlier. I'm not sure if you follow NASDAQ on Twitter, but he's the only person that I know who's in hard tech and deep tech, and he covers it really well. I could see switching right into that niche because there's really there's like a billion people on TikTok. There's not another person on there that can talk the stuff that you understand and explain it like you do. And that's honestly a gift. And that's how you're going to get a lot more people reading and a lot more people looking into it. And also sharing it here, because I'm sure like even just beyond the blogs, your opinions and takes are all super valuable. So, but
yeah,
we did come up right up.
But Michael, that might be a good feature request. If there was a way I could share my tweets directly to Entre, that would be awesome.
Embedding tweets?
Yeah.
You have embedded YouTube videos, but not tweets yet.
Yeah.
But Andrew, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Honestly, I do want to do a deep tech room now, because like I feel like I would just love to learn more. Like, let's definitely set it up sometime. Get some you and some other people from Cantos, me from Lux. We can hit up Rahal. I'd love to do it, and even though it's super niche, I just do it for myself because I think it'd just be super awesome to just like throw out a couple topics and roll with it and see how it goes. Keep it super conversational. But dude, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to hang out with me. And guys, make sure to follow Andrew here on Entre, because he's always sharing out his blog post. So dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. You guys all have a great night.
All right. We'll catch you out.
You as well.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of GenZ Talks. Make sure to connect with me and thousands of other entrepreneurs, investors, and creators over at joinentre.com. Or you can download our mobile app for both iOS and Android. Also, don't forget to follow us on social at Join Entre.